Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading another textbook, cover to cover. This one is from 1940, and we're almost, maybe a little more than a third of the way done. This might be my last history textbook because I think I'm getting tired of it. But that's okay, because this is good. Chapter 6, The Birth of Our Nation. How bad laws caused trouble. This book is from 1940. Relations between the colonies. The English colonies did not have much need for contact with one another before the French and Indian War. Each colony had its own problems to solve. There was little reason for knowing or trying to understand each other's problems. The colonies dealt with England rather than with one another. Roads were poor, and there was little traveling between the colonies. There was some contact through trading. So few people were affected by trade that trade was not important in helping people of one colony to become acquainted with the people of another colony. During the French and Indian War, the colonists really met and had a chance to know each other. England was later to feel the influence of this contact by the colonists. A change of feelings. The French and Indian War had some very important effects on the American colonists. Some of these effects were: 1. The war gave the colonists more united feeling. They all faced the same dangers in the war. They all had to fight together. They had come to know and to like one another. 2. The colonists had fought well. They knew that they fought just as well as the trained English troops. 3. The colonists felt more free after the close of the French and Indian War. They no longer had to depend upon England to protect them from the French. 4. The war had cost a great sum of money, as wars always do. England thought that the colonists should help to pay the costs of the war. The costs of the French and Indian War. England was deeply in debt. She paid out huge sums of money to conquer France in America, the French in America. Even after the war was over, an army was kept in the conquered territory. This cost a great sum of money. The Indians had to be watched, and the country had to be kept peaceful. Who was to pay for war? Who was to pay the expense of keeping an army in America? These questions came up in the English Parliament. This is the lawmaking body of the English government. The Parliament makes the laws of the land. There was much discussion about the costs of war. Parliament decided that American colonies should help pay the debt. This money was to be raised by taxes. At first, Parliament attempted to enforce some old tax laws. This plan failed. Parliament then passed a law called the Stamp Tax. The Stamp Tax. This law was passed by Parliament in 1765. This was only 2 years after the end of the French and Indian War. According to this new law, the colonists were required to place stamps on all important papers. The storekeeper had to stamp his bills. The banker had to stamp his checks. Every college diploma had to be stamped. Deeds and leases to property, pamphlets, and even news sheets were stamped. The effect of the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act made most of the colonists very angry. Although they did not live in England, the colonists felt that they should have the same rights as the Englishmen. They became aroused and began to discuss the matter even on street corners. The colonists knew that no Englishman would let himself be taxed without having something to say about the tax. Few of the English people living in England thought very highly of the colonists. The English had some queer notions about American colonists as well. 1. The English more or less looked down upon the colonists. 2. Englishmen thought that it was the duty of the colonies to help make the mother country rich. 3. They considered it a duty of the colonists to trade with England only and to buy only from England. And 4. English felt that the colonists should do everything that Parliament told them to do. There was a wise man in America who began to see it would be better if the colonies had a chance to manage their own affairs. Patrick Henry of Virginia was one of the first Americans to protest against the unjust laws passed by Parliament. Patrick Henry had been elected a member of the House of Burgesses. This was a lawmaking body in the Virginia colony, the rights of the colonists. The meeting of the House of Burgesses was being held and Patrick Henry was there. Patrick Henry rose to speak, and he said that the Stamp Act was unjust. He declared that the right to tax the people of Virginia belonged to their own assembly, the House of Burgesses, and not to the Parliament of England. He became more earnest as he spoke. He condemned the methods of the English Parliament and the King of England. Some of the members of the House of Burgesses were frightened. Others were shocked. They thought that Patrick Henry was threatening the king. An attack upon the ruler of the government is an attack and an act of treason. Members of the House of Burgesses cried out, "Treason! Treason! Treason! If this be treason, make the most of it," answered Patrick Henry. The picture on page 187 shows how the scene looked. Why don't we take a look? The lighting is not very good, so it's not going to be clear. What happened? There it is. Okay, moving on. The beginning of the Union. Time went on and feelings against the English government grew stronger in America. Wise men saw that the colonies ought to form some kind of union. They realized that England was taking away their rights. The colonies were called upon to send delegates to meet in Philadelphia in 1774. This meeting was called the First Continental Congress. Virginia sent Patrick Henry as a delegate to the First Continental Congress. At this meeting, Patrick Henry's good sense was of great value. He explained to the delegates that they needed to become more united. This is the plain way he put it to the Union. The distinction between Virginians and Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers and New Englanders is no more. I am not a Virginian, but I am an American. England's bad management. The speeches of Patrick Henry should have been a warning to the English that trouble was brewing in the colonies. The English were stubborn. They could not understand why the colonists were unhappy. They could not understand that the colonists might even fight for their rights. Repeal of the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was repealed by the Parliament. It was not canceled it was canceled not because the English Parliament was willing to admit the Stamp Act was unjust, but because the law was hurting English merchants. Other bad laws. England made some bad mistakes. Bad laws were forced upon the colonists. The people in Boston were angered by the presence of the king's troops. The royal government in Virginia dared to interfere with one of the royal government. The people of Boston angered by the presence of King's troops. The royal governor in Virginia dared to interfere with one of the dearest rights of the free man. It is the unwritten law that free men have the right to meet. The governor of Virginia would not permit the House of Burgesses to meet in the capital, Williamsburg, an important meeting. The Virginians were determined men. Since they could not meet in Williamsburg, they met at Richmond. Old St. John's Church was chosen as the meeting place. The men who met on March 23, 1775, knew that there was serious business ahead. There was less joking than usual as they stood in little groups waiting for the time of the meeting. The men thoughtfully took their seats in the church. Patrick Henry sat toward the front in the fifth pew. A great speech. The meeting opened. Patrick Henry arose and declared that Virginia must arm herself. He plainly said that Virginia must be ready to go to war, if necessary, for her rights. Try to picture him standing there, as earnest tones of his voice rang through the air. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace. But there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of sounding arms. Our brethren are already on the field. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course they may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry said that. Goodbye. Have a good day. I didn't know that.